Hello, and welcome to the Music Industry Blog podcast. My name is Mark Mulligan, and today I want to talk to you about the socially integrated web. The socially integrated web is a term I use to describe Facebook's digital content strategy. It is a strategy that others are following too, but that Facebook is currently doing best. Facebook has been quietly putting the building blocks of its socially integrated web into place over the last year or so. But the most dramatic moves were announced at Facebook's F8 conference in September. In it, we heard about Facebook's controversial timeline feature. This, along with other functions such as likes on websites across the web, are Facebook's attempt to join the dots in our increasingly fragmented and cluttered digital lives. Facebook wants to insert itself at the centre of as much of our digital lives as it possibly can. It wants to, nay, needs to, because Facebook is entering its adolescence as a company and needs to start planning for life as an adult. Mark Zuckerberg knows all too well that no company is invincible in the face of competition. There was, after all, a time when MySpace had the social networking world at its feet and almost overnight crumbled into a curious footnote. The odds of Facebook following such a rapid path to obscurity are small, but it will sometime or another have to face a serious challenge from a would-be Facebook killer. Who knows, Google Plus may yet prove to be that challenger. To better protect against competitive threat, Facebook needs to be as deeply integrated into as many parts of our lives as it can be. Currently, it has a great communication lock-in. How many of our outer circle of friends have we lost phone numbers and emails for so that Facebook is the only means of contacting them? But Facebook wants to have similar lock-ins right across our digital lives, especially within content experiences. It is pulling more of our content experiences into Facebook and at the same time pushing itself outwards into more of our content experiences that happen in the outside web. Facebook wants to become a 21st century portal, and indeed, it is already a long way to becoming one. The term 21st century portal is one that was first penned by a former Jupiter Research colleague of mine, David Card. Its basic premise is that the late 20th century originated portals, such as AOL, MSN and Yahoo, created content in a traditional media company manner. They paid for it and they created it. 21st century portals, however, have their audience create the content themselves, whether that be from the users directly or from the users plugging their content experiences from other sources into the 21st century portal. MySpace tried and failed to be one. Facebook is trying again, but in a more tightly integrated manner that places coexistence with other content destinations at its heart. Facebook's story for the content companies is that it is one of the two key doorways that consumers use to enter the web. Google is the doorway to the places on the web that we don't yet know. Facebook is the doorway to the people and places we do know. Facebook's 800 million users make it a direct conduit to the world's most engaged web audience. As Facebook begins to draw more content companies into its socially integrated web strategy, so it begins to create an ecosystem, one that is not defined by a device or store, but by a unique collection of user data and by user convenience. It wasn't so long ago that content ecosystems were largely the domain of device manufacturers like Apple. But all of that is changing. Indeed, now it is possible to view the entire digital content landscape through the lenses of 4 different types of content ecosystem. If we think about content along 2 axes, one of ownership and one of openness, we end up with 4 key buckets of content types, each of which in turn leads to a different form of content ecosystem. Moving clockwise and starting in the top right, we have the traditional territory of content ecosystems. These are device-based ecosystems. They are defined by consumer devices like the iPad, the Kindle and the Xbox. They revolve around device-based consumption of owned content that is either purchased from an integrated store and is typically tied to the ecosystem with some use of digital rights management, or is sourced from a user's own collection. Then we have user-based ecosystems. These are based upon users' own content collections. The photos and videos we create ourselves, and all of the unprotected, professionally created content we have either ripped or purchased. We create our own ecosystem wall around this content by choosing who we share this content with and where. Next, our open web-based ecosystems. These are the least structured of ecosystems, based around openly accessible web content destinations. At first sight, these might look anything but like an ecosystem. And yet, there are numerous tactics that open web destinations increasingly are using to create virtual ecosystems. For example, a video destination might define a narrow set of partner sites where it will make its content available, forcing the user to stay within that ecosystem of sites in order to access that content. Finally, in the top, we have protected web-based ecosystems. Here, content companies pull down walls around their content. Sometimes these walls are paid, sometimes they are free but password restricted. Sometimes they are created by making content experiences app-based, ensuring the content experience can only happen within the app. What is perhaps surprising, considering how close some of these ecosystems are, is the degree to which overlaps and coexistence occur. To some degree, this is a pragmatic recognition by content owners and device companies in particular that much of their customers' digital life will exist outside of the inner sanctums of their ecosystems, and that failure to support this activity will limit their appeal. There is also the less altruistic intent to fish for customers outside of these inner sanctums, to sink their hooks so deeply into other parts of our digital lives that the value of those other content ecosystems begins to weaken. And this is where Facebook and its socially integrated web strategy comes into play. The walls of Facebook's ecosystem are user data and user experience. The more that it integrates, internally and externally, with our digital lives, the more value Facebook is able to deliver us in terms of recommendations and curation. It also, of course, delivers just the same value to advertisers, but that's a whole further discussion that is outside of the remit of this podcast. Imagine a day where Facebook becomes your digital content dashboard, where you can access and manage all of your favourite digital content experiences, where Facebook can actually help you figure out what your favourite content experiences are, where a universal player will let you play back music from any one of your music services, on-demand TV shows from any one of your video providers, read digital books from any one of your digital stores, catch up with feeds from all of your newspaper and magazine subscriptions, play any one of your favourite games. All of that may be some way off yet, but Facebook has already taken some sizable steps in that direction. Spotify's scrapping of its own login in favour of a universal Facebook login is simply illustrative of one content company being one step further along Facebook's socially integrated web path than others. Of course, Facebook will get pushback from users and content providers alike, especially from the device-based ecosystems, where there is most to lose from increased openness. But the pull of Facebook's 800 million users will prove too much for most content providers, and indeed already is. 800 million users means having the majority of the most valuable portion of the world's most engaged internet users at your fingertips. Closer and more easily accessible than any ad campaign could get you. Data and privacy issues aside, there is a huge amount of upside for consumers. The short to mid-term story for content owners is also strong. Long-term though, there are some big question marks. Think through the logic of deep integration of content experiences into Facebook. Eventually, the content brand gets subverted and subsumed by Facebook. Also, a convenience lock-in effect emerges where the convenience of accessing a diversity of content experiences in one unified place makes users less and less inclined to spend time with those content experiences outside of the Facebook ecosystem. This is when Facebook's hooks are sunk firmly in and the line is being reeled in. Of course, content companies have tools with which they can push back, such as placing restrictions on the Facebook integrated content experiences. But by doing so, they will risk looking less compelling than their direct competitors who, of course, will be positioned directly alongside them in Facebook's universal content dashboard. All of which raises questions about Facebook's role in digital content. There is no question that a role exists for a curator of our fragmented and cluttered digital content experiences. There is also no question that Facebook is uniquely well placed to play this role. What is in question is whether content companies and consumers end up as strong winners as Facebook will from the socially integrated web.